Welcome to Getting Naked, where we strip away the bullshit and dive headfirst into the raw, unfiltered, and hilariously messy world of life and entrepreneurship.
We're here to expose the real truths of owning a business and the gut-wrenching challenges that pop up along the way. More importantly, the mind-blowing rewards while we juggle personal growth, wild adventures as digital entrepreneurs traveling the world, and the ins and outs of an interracial relationship, all seasoned with those what the fuck moments that make it all worthwhile.
This isn't your typical buttoned-up podcast. We're uncensored, unapologetically authentic, and just plain funny as fuck. We live by facts over feelings, bringing you the real deal without sugarcoating shit. So, buckle up buttercups, and get ready to get real, get raw, and most importantly, have a laugh with us.
But wait, there's more. We're breaking new ground into the Metaverse with our Hello Plaza. That's right, folks, we're taking this shit to the next level. We are one of the first podcasts in the Metaverse. You can join us from all your devices. Hell, you can even join from your cell phone. Just press the damn button and join us. You won't blow up. We promise.
Now, let's get naked.
And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we want to welcome you all to the Getting Naked podcast. And if you don't know, we are live. If you don't know, we are live in the Getting Naked studio in the Hello Plaza in Metaverse that we want you guys to come and join this amazing conversation and be a part of. And we want to thank you guys all for joining us in our episode 6, season 3 of Getting Naked podcast with the Hello LLC. And today's amazing conversation that we're going to talk about today is you're not lazy, you're broke. You're not lazy or broke. You're just choosing comfort over growth. And that's what we're going to be talking about today and bringing some amazing facts, some stats, and our personal, feedback on this topic, especially as being digital entrepreneurs, being able to travel the world from Colombia to Mexico and soon to be somewhere over on the far east side of town. And so definitely be on the lookout for that. But look here, when we talk about you're not lazy or broke, right? We want you guys to understand that we don't mean broke in the pocketbook. We don't mean broke in that shape, form, or fashion at all. We mean broke as in energy, broke as in integrity, broke as in, your actual frequency, your energy, your vibration, and more importantly, being aware of these things. Are you being lazy, right? Because I can tell you, people are fucking lazy and they don't want to admit to it. They don't want to own up to it, and they continue to be lazy and know they're being lazy. And what happens is that frustration and that irritation and that ooey gooey feeling then spews out to everywhere else in their life because they're being lazy and not being aware of how they're showing up. And this is where that haterade comes from. This is where that nastiness comes from, that pettiness comes from. This is where those generational, things that we've continued to fester from our parents, because hurt people at the end of the day. Whether your mama, your daddy, your brother, your sister, whoever, those vibrations and those energies really rub off on us. Because I'm here to tell you guys, there's a huge stat that you get around someone that is lazy, that is unproductive, and you are a very high producing person, that person is going to bring you down. Versus the other way around, that if you put a lazy person around a high productivity person, that person is going to move up. And so this is why we share with you, be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of the story you tell yourself, first and foremost. Be aware of those surroundings. Be aware of the sacrifices. Be aware of the standards that are set. And then more importantly, have that conversation with the soul. And that's really what this podcast is about today, is having that conversation with yourself and being upfront and honest, and stop bullshitting yourself. Because so many times we bullshit ourselves and we stay in this lazy, nonchalant way of living our lives. And we wonder why shit don't work, because your ass ain't fucking working. You're doing the same shit over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's just not how the shit works. You have to put in so you can get out. And what you give is what you get. And a lot of people don't understand that, especially coming from a Black person. When I talk to our clients, when we talk to our surroundings, when I talk to Tara about these things, you got to be able to be aware of how you show up and when you show up, and then be able to accept the conversation, be able to be willing to listen to it and not falter back, run away, avoid, deny, and then go back and say some shit that you probably shouldn't have said to yourself, more importantly, and to others, and then be aware to restore your integrity, more importantly, with yourself. Fuck the other person, right? We always talk about this person didn't take ownership, that person didn't do this person didn't do that. But what the fuck did you do? And how are you going to restore it to yourself other than the other person at the end of the day? So when we talk about, comfort or growth, that's where it really comes from. So many people choose to be comfortable other than growing. And a lot of people talk about growing. A lot of people talk about understanding the other person, or, oh, I want to conversate. Oh, I want to communicate. Oh, I want to understand. And then when it comes down to doing it, you act the same asshole way or be the same dickhead that you've been from the jump. And you're just talking out your ass. And you're really, truly not wanting to have that conversation or growth mindset, because I'll share with you guys once again, rich people think of solutions. Broke people think of problems. And so many people think of problems and what happened, this happened, that happened, other than talking and doing the solution and not claiming they're doing the solution. Or as I was told, David, sometimes I'll do this, do that. We'll do the 1-2 dance, and I do the 1-2 dance, but then in all reality, you don't do the 1-2 dance, but you're claiming you did the 1-2 dance. That doesn't work effectively. That's not growth. You're choosing comfort and denying and reneging and doing the same shit that doesn't get you nowhere. And so that's really what I want to share with you guys today on this conversation. And even more importantly, right, when we talk about these things, I want us to understand there's mindset and there's excuses. There's money and there's financial habits, right? There's time management and there's productivity. There's, there's really, you have to be able to understand these things. And I'm just not going to share this shit out of just sharing. I share these things from my personal experience that I want you all to be able to grasp onto, whether you like it, whether you dislike it. Yes, I'm coming at you strong. I'm coming at you raw. Some of y'all have been babyfied so much. Some of us have lied to ourselves so much. And some of us just sit around and wonder why shit don't work. 92% of people fail to achieve their goals because of their lack of consistency and discipline. We continuously talk about that as commitment and consistency. And so many people talk about it, but they're not about it, especially being disciplined about it when it matters in the heat of the battle, right? Fear over failure is one of the top reasons people don't pursue growth. And you guys know when I share about fear, false evidence appearing real, fear in my eyes is really focus, energy, arrange to react. What do you focus on? Where's your energy? You talk about high vibration. You talk about being nice to people. Are you actually that person? Are you showing up? Is it arranged in that way? And are you responding or are you reacting? And most people, let me just tell you right now, they react and they don't respond the way that they talk about they would like to respond or how they should respond to keep an effective communication. And not only that, communication, ladies and gentlemen, 90% is listening, 10% is actually talking. And a lot of the times we don't listen to people. We listen to respond. Our looking good runs the show. Our avoiding to look bad shows up. And then this is where the vindictiveness, the throwing the grenades, being evil and mean shows up in our lives. And we really just self-sabotage ourselves at the end of the day. And this is where that growth mindset or that comfort mindset comes into place. And only 8% of people successfully follow through on their New Year's resolutions. And that's that we talk about this all the time. People who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them, right? And it takes an average of 65 days to form a new habit. Just because you don't interrupt somebody one conversation and you've interrupted them 15 years or 100 years or 10 days and you do it once, you can't hold your hat onto that. This has to be a consistency of not doing the things that you said you wouldn't do And more importantly, not holding the other person to something that you do 10 times harder when you mess up. And so really, at the end of the day, comfort zone shrinks over time. What once felt easy, right, will eventually feel difficult if you allow that comfort zone to be prideful, to be egotistical, to continue to dwell and swim in your own mud and continue to stay in that comfort zone. A pig in its own mud is still a pig, right, at the end of the day. And, especially being an entrepreneur, you have to have, high activity. You have to be able to understand discomfort. You have to be able to understand when it's time to grow and be aware of how you show up. And so, with that being said, Tara, do you have anything that you would like to share or add on now that you're here?
Well, happy, beautiful Friday, people. It is a lovely Friday, and today we are here getting naked. And getting naked means that we get to have real, raw, authentic conversations. And so, as Mr. Jones got us started off, I was here, I was getting all the live started in the background. So, as Mr. Jones kicked us off here today and shared his 2 cents about you're not broke, because again, broke does not mean broke in the pocketbook. Broke means broke mindedness. And guess what? Each and everybody, all of us are broke minded. All of us are. Regardless of how much personal development we have done, we all have a limitation still within our blind spot. And having the ability to stop and understand that we all have a blind spot is where the true gift to overcome that brokenness. So being able to stop and truly take a look at oneself, yourself, and being able to say, I'm doing pretty good. I've come pretty far. Man, you should have seen me 15, 20, 30 years ago. But who I am today is a lot better than who I was then. But still understanding that you still have room to grow, as everybody does. And that is what today's conversation is about. Today's conversation is for us to share with you guys things that we have went through within our personal and our professional life, our journey, to be able to share that back to you, so that way as you are going through your journey, whether you're ahead of us, next to us, behind us, wherever you're at within your journey, we hopefully can provide some value to your journey, so that way you understand you're not alone. Because the biggest thing that happens is that what we are talking about here is essentially mental health. Essentially, we're talking about how much are you exercising your brain? What are you providing your brain? What are you putting into your body? All of these factors that contribute to what we know as today as mental health. And so when we have the topic of you're not lazy or broke, you're just choosing comfort over growth. First of all, don't beat yourself up. That is human nature. Human nature is to be within the comfort zone. That is how we are built. However, 99% of the people that are going to listen to this podcast are from this amazing country, the United States. And in the United States, we have this thing called hustle culture. And hustle culture will send you to where you are constantly chasing your tail. So you're like, I'm not lazy. I'm working 3 jobs. Yep. But you're working harder, not smarter. You're foregoing your mental health in order to continue to stay within the same rat race of, I got to pay the bills. I've got to make this money. I've got to put a roof over my head. I got a family to feed. I got all of these stipulations that I need to take care of. And at the end of the day, it keeps us on the rat race, on the treadmill, as we know. And that is what, is the old American dream. David and I were just sharing today that the new American dream is moving out of the United States. And I had a conversation with somebody, about that today. It's a real conversation. There's a lot of people who, are learning how to get off of the rat race, understanding the burnout that comes from the constant everyday that happens. So the reason I share that is because it's not your fault that you're stuck in survival. That's how you've been trained. That's how you've been brought up. That's the conditioned ways that you have been a part of, and you didn't even know you're conditioned. Like you tell us that we're conditioned as, Americans, and we're like, what are you talking about? We're not conditioned. Yes, we are. You go to school. That's to teach you how to be a good person that shows up on time, follows the rules, get good grades. You get a break, you get a lunch break, you get a recess, you get to go home, and you do it all over again 5 days a week. They're setting you up to be a great worker and not a great thinker. And that's what today's conversation is to help you do. It is to help you be able to break out of the matrix, for lack of better terms, for you to understand that you are the one who controls what you're doing and how you're going through this life. So if you feel that you're on the rat race, if you feel that this title, caught your attention, if you feel like, man, I just can't get ahead, I don't understand this, I'm stuck. It's really important to understand that you're not alone. As you're growing, you are not alone. There's other people going through it. Mr. Jones shared with you some things that are actually going through, from personal experience, and shared with you of personal experiences that are showing up for us as we are navigating this same topic. And so as we sit here in a podcast that is all about having an authentic, real conversation, that's what we're due, is we will be humble and be able to bring that conversation to you and share with you with all humility that we too still struggle. We still both, even though we've done a lot of personal development, are still broke-minded at times. We still don't see our own faults. We still don't see our own shadows. It is easier for us to see other things that are going on, whether I see them easier when David's doing it or David sees it easier when I'm doing something. We too still, as humans, are trying to understand how to navigate that mentality and those thinking and that mental health journey to be able to have effective communication, to be able to be in the present, which is one of the biggest things that David and I have learned through our personal development and journey, is how to be in the present. A lot of times what's happening is people are getting stuck in the past. For instance, David shared with me, well, Tara, you've done this for the past 15 years. You've done this example of behavior for the last 15 years in our relationship. And I only have done it once in our relationship, and I'm getting held to the mechanism and the mannerism and the degree of if I was the one that was doing it for 15 years. See, now, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with the statement that's made. However, as we know, and as Mr. Jones shared in this podcast at the beginning, was, are you being present with what is happening today and currently, and being solution minded? Because at the end of the day, when you show up and you have a point of view, you have an understanding, You have a mechanism that is at play. If you are not willing to understand that there are multiple solutions that are available in the mechanism of the matrix that you're dealing with, and you only think that there's one solution, there's only one possible outcome of how things transpire, then you don't understand at the end of the day that at some point in your life, you've had an experience that's called a deja vu, where you're like, I've been here before, I've done this before, I know this, that seems familiar. That's the same thing that happens in the mind. So when we're talking about you're not lazy or broke, you're just choosing comfort over growth, that's all of us, because our bodies want to put us in a state of safety. It's either survival or safety. And if you as a person, which this was a part of the conversation that we had on our last podcast, so go check out our last podcast episode, which was, conversations around being in an interracial relationship and how to navigate, those experiences, and what I've discovered and what I've learned in being in a relationship with someone who is not of the same ethnical background that I am. That continues every day. That continues into this conversation. Because at the end of the day, when a society, and the American society, we all know what the American society is that it is division. There's divisiveness between genders, skin color, religious backgrounds, classification of like where you work, if you're blue collar or white collar, financial divisions. There's divisions all across the states. We are a divided country, and it fosters that division to create survival mode that keeps everybody in that rat race survival mode that I was talking about when we first, jumped on here, was that we are stuck in a survival mode of keeping up with the bills, keeping up with the Joneses, got to pay this, got to pay that. Oh, we got a new boat because, the next door neighbor or our best friend got one. And so we want to go out with them. And so we want to take our boat. It's just that got to keep up. That looking good running the show is what David and I have classified that as. So as today, David, opened up and shared, there's a lot of things that he shared are our personal experiences that we're literally going through as we speak. As we speak. Before this podcast, we have a conversation that is going on of something that we have two differencing of points of view, not differencing of points of view. We see it differently, but we have a space to want the other person to understand where we're coming from so we can understand where they're coming from. However, when that communication shows up between us, let's just call a spade, it is over race. It is a conversation of, hey, Tara, you don't understand what I am dealing with, and that how you do this when I've asked you to do something different. So don't make a statement of, hey, I'm getting, a different tone, a different loudness, a different quality of my voice, but ask instead. And when you make that statement resonates with me as though you're showing up with a white privilege of changing the goalposts. And if anybody's that doesn't understand the terms of changing the goalposts, that means that you're talking about one set of issues or the issue at hand, and then all of a sudden there's another issue, and then there's another issue. And now instead of talking about the original issue A, we're 17 issues down the ladder an issue Z, you know. And so it's understanding that, as David has shared for me, as him being a Black man in America, as his entire life, he has had to deal with the goalpost being changed all the time. He has told me that he has had to deal with, and this is a conversation that we have just had. So I'm sharing this because what happens is that we can use communication effectively to be able to actually say, hey, this is what I've had to deal with, which is what I was sharing with you that David's had to deal with as a Black man living and growing up in Houston, Texas, and the United States, as well as in a relationship with me as a white woman, and how things and tendencies that I have or do, or how I say things, or how I bring things to a matter, I, who am not aware, is showing up to David as being dismissive or having white privilege, or what would people would call as a Karen. So understanding that conversation is a part of what this conversation here is, getting out of your comfort zone. And what David was sharing at the beginning of this conversation, and even what he was sharing in our private share, was hard to get out of your comfort zone and have this conversation to get out of your comfort zone, which at the end of the day, hey, I'm going to share you this. Getting out of your comfort zone is hard. You know, I think I'm up for anything. And then you get out of your comfort zone, like, you know, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute on your back, or being called up that you're doing something, your mannerisms, your comments, your way of being is affecting someone that you care and you love. So you have to stop as a human, and I share this, you know, from my perspective only, that's hard at times. And you have to really pull yourself up to a level to say, hey, you got to hear this. There's something askew here. It might be just that person's perspective, but that person that you're listening to, you first of all, who is the person you're listening to? If it's someone that's very close in your inner circle, absolutely. You know, you got to listen, and so you can understand what they're communicating to you. But if it's somebody out there, you know, just a Joe Blow on the street that's, you know, you don't know from Adam or Eve, and you didn't even say hi, didn't even look, or didn't even have an interaction with somebody, and they're coming, then understand that that's different, right? So it comes to the fact of, you know, in this conversation is understanding the part of the growth, getting out of that comfort zone, being into a growth zone. It's not easy. Most people don't want to do it. And that's why I talked about at the beginning of this conversation is it's mental health. It is that we are not encouraged as people to say, we don't create environments for people to want to feel like they can talk or communicate. That's by either our actions or our words. And it happens all over. It just happened between David and I, right? Where the communication gets broken by one way or another, actions or comments. And then that communication gets broken and you slide back. And that's where people mostly slide back into the comfort zone and say, okay, well, this is a whole lot more comfortable. I'd just rather be here in the upset where you've done something to me. And how dare you, or in the sense of it's not being able to understand that somebody else is coming to the table and that you might have stepped on their toes, or you both have stepped on each other's toes. That also happens with yourself. And that's why we talk about the comfort zone. You know, Will Smith said this, wonderfully. I don't know, it was within the last 10 or 15 years that he's jumped out of an airplane. He went skydiving, and he was definitely afraid of skydiving. He was like, I don't want to skydive. I don't want to jump out of a perfectly good plane. And then he did it. And when he did it, he said what he didn't realize is that everything he always wanted was on the other side of that fear. And that's what happens, is that we've all got a fear of something going on. Usually the fear is hurt, rejection, not being understood. We're humans. We want companionship. We want to be understood. We want to have, fair living for all, where everybody does not have to go through injustices and things like that. We want peace as humans, and we want joy, but we have been conditioned to understand that we live in a different society, and that society has been strung up to where we're constantly hustling, constantly in the go, 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 constantly divided. And because of that division, it causes people of different ethnical backgrounds to constantly be in a world of like on their toes. I was just having that conversation this morning, and I was sharing this with David that, we have guests here at our Airbnb, and it is a beautiful couple from the States. The husband is Hispanic, Mexican, and the wife is white. And her and I were having the conversation, like she even said, I was unaware of these things that happen completely until her and her husband, united. And she shared a couple of stories with me where, even coming to Mexico, he experiences discrimination because of living in America as a Mexican, and the vice versa. When he's back in the States, he definitely, as we all know, there's this discrimination that happens with the Latin community, just as we have talked about the discrimination that happens with the Black community. And so, as well as David and I were just talking the other day about the discrimination that happens within the Native American community right now. Not right now, it's been going on. So we as a nation are conditioned to be divided. And because of that division, it has put everybody at odds. And then the communication breaks down. And communication, because we are not taught communication. They don't teach you communication. They teach you English, they teach you reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they don't teach you communication. The funny thing is I remember there used to be a communication course when I was in high school, and they don't offer that anymore. Because at the end of the day, they do not want people to communicate. Because if people can communicate and get over their differences and say, okay, gotcha. This is how, I have made you feel. I take ownership of that. I understand that. How can I, in the future, navigate to where I am not stepping on your toes or creating a situation that does not serve us both in the good? That people don't have. Those conversations people don't have, because that's getting out of the comfort zone. That's breaking through the survival mode. That's where people fall back into either being so busy that they're constantly going. They're in frozen state, which is what we call lazy, because they're so fucking overstimulated and so deep within the throes of I don't know what I'm doing or how to even survive. The sad thing about this is I look at it, and I've watched other people just outside of David and I's relationship. I've watched other people close to me, one person being my brother, and I watch him go through things in life, and like the mental movement that happens inside of humans, as especially humans that you see people and you say, oh, they've changed. Well, in reality, it's evolution, where we're growing and we're discovering new things, and we're learning how to be able to navigate the lines of communication. I mean, there's constantly things in business that David and I deal with that is potential clients or existing clients or previous day two clients, that there's a lack of communication, or there's a breakdown of communication. They don't know how to communicate. And a lot of times we find within the professional side of things as well, we have to stop and say, hey, no worries, we appreciate you opening up a line of communication, but this is in order for us to do what we need to do and to best serve you from a business point of view, you've got to have, effective communication. And effective communication is taking out the emotion. And taking the emotion out of effective communication is hard. I get caught up in it. David gets caught up in it. We all get caught up in it. Especially, I'll just speak for David and I. We really get caught up in it from both ends because we're Cancers and we are this water sign. And a water sign can absolutely be quick, fast, in a hurry. And as what people say, Cancers are the most emotional sign there is. So dealing with that as well, because there's a, regardless if you're into astrology or not, we just had a full moon last night. And many of you don't know that it was a full eclipse, right? The moon went behind Earth for a duration of about an hour last night. That has an effect on people as well, that leaves them not willing to get out of their comfort zone. Like, people don't realize how much effect they are. People just think that what's affecting them is right here, what they see and what they're experiencing with their five senses. And what most people don't realize is that, yep, that's a portion of the equation, but that's only about 30% of the equation. 70% of the equation is also what's going on with the planets, your own astrology chart, and how that all ties in and moves around. And a lot of people think that's hogwash. And you can think it's hogwash, but I will share from a perspective that I too used to think it's hogwash, and starting to understand more and more and educate myself about those things. I too learned that it's not hogwash. It is factors that weigh in. Now, you can also throw in additional layer of what's going on spiritually. That's a whole different matter. I'm not saying religiously, I'm saying spiritually. That too is a different level that keeps people within their comfort zone, right? We're not going to dive deep off into that platform, but it's just understanding that there is an effect happening. And we as humans, because we can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't hear it, we can't taste it, we can't touch it, because we can't do any of those five senses to it, we don't know what's going on. We don't know that we're being affected, that there's a full moon coming through, and that absolutely, why do you think there's stories about werewolves? Because it has effects on people, and they tell you in a story type of way that seems so far-fetched that doesn't happen. But in reality, they take the basis of reality and then soup it up so it doesn't sound like it's reality. But people change when things are happening, and your planets are moving around, and it's based on what your astrology chart shows up as, right? So you layer all this shit together, you just have one big shit sandwich. Excuse my French. Because we're not given the tools as kids to be able to stop and say, okay, how do we navigate through these things? How do I navigate through the fact that it's going to be a full moon? How do I navigate through the fact that there's going to be, it's summer, it's hot, and I, overheat, or it's cold and I don't, my body doesn't move very good during the cold. Like, all of these things, environmental, things, all of these different factors weigh in. So when we talk about, hey, you're not lazy or broke, you're just choosing comfort. Well, that's because you've only been taught comfort, and you've been taught to chase comfort by trading your time for money, which puts you in survival. And once you're in survival, you're not willing to go look at any of this other factors. You're like, shit, I can't even keep up with, keeping a roof over my head and my bills paid on time. How am I supposed to even look at any of this other stuff? Right? So we all go through it. We're all being challenged. And as I shared with you, David and I, are challenged personally within a conversation that we're having, within our personal life, of navigating two different perspectives and trying for the other person to understand where you're coming from. Now, that's all easier said than done. It's easier to sit there and say, I hear you. I completely understand. Well, I don't understand because I'm not a black man. And well, first of all, I'm not a black American and I'm not a male. Those are two different distinctions that I am not. So to sit here and say, I understand, I don't. And in vice versa, David is not a female. He does not understand that. He definitely doesn't understand, being white either. And by being white, what I mean by that is he hasn't had that experience of him being a white man. So we talk about these things so openly and authentically, so that way, not only for ourselves, but we also believe that why not? Why not be able to share these things with our community as we're growing? Because if we can be open and authentic and real about the growth and, where we're getting stuck and where we're getting hung up at, and not trying, because we will navigate through it. It's just how gracefully do we do it within communication and not allowing the emotions to get the best of us. And, I speak for my own self because I get frustrated. I get frustrated in the conversation when, I'm trying to, be inclusive and understand and have an awareness, and it's not showing up that way. It's not. It's showing up where it's divisive, where it's ostracizing, where it's creating an environment where David feels differently about it, And so it's hard to be in those communication channels, especially when it's personal, especially when it's someone that you care about deeply, because like I had this conversation earlier today with the guest that was staying here, most people want the best for everybody, including themselves. There is a good in most people, but we get challenged by being able to be open with oneself about where their actions or words are falling short and creating an atmosphere that is not what that person intended. And this happens, like I'll share this. A lot of times people are unaware. I've seen this, at a professional level. People think they're showing up in one way, and they say, hey, I'm saying this, I'm doing this. And in reality, they're not. Like Mr. Jones shared earlier. Like, we have a thing within the 15 years of us being together is being, in two different households. In my household, my dad got loud. And so how I knew to resolve conflict was to get loud. And that has been something I have been working on for 15 years of David and I's relationship, that I would say within the last 6 months or a year, I have just finally gotten better about, being aware of, hey, you're getting loud. It's still not getting it like down pat. Just would say within the last 6 months to 90 days that I'm a lot better with like, okay, let's be calm, cool, collected about this. Let's have a conversation and not get loud. And that is systematic. That is part of my condition. That is part of the environment that I was raised in, right? So then you get in a conversation or a relationship with David and I, and that is how I'm choosing to resolve issues, and it doesn't work, right? David is sharing, hey, that doesn't work for me, and here's why this doesn't work for me. Because when you yell, first of all, that's not how things were solved in our household. But secondly, you have to understand you're a white woman, and when you yell and you do this, there are so many factors that are going on. If we're out in public and you get loud or you yell at me or you create some sort of, issue that's going on here, that will create a scene. And I am a Black man and you are a white woman. And that means if the law shows up, they take your side, no questions asked. They don't even hear what I have to say. And bye-bye, David. So having to understand that, then also, it doesn't work even inside of our own privacy of our own house, because then it just comes off as completely disrespectful. And to be very frank, yeah, it is disrespectful. But how long has that taken me to learn that? And that's my own fault, right? That's my own fault. That's nobody else's fault but my own. So that's been something that's always been within, my bailiwick of where I need to tighten up my communication skill set, right? That is full on ownership of nobody else has communication ownership over anything like that, Tara, but yourself. Only you can control that. Only you can prevent forest fires, right? So I share that because in this comfort over growth, I can only share from a perspective of my own and not putting any, as David shares, don't put words in other people's mouths. And that's been something that he's also shared with me, that when I share back or when I'm, sharing my perspective, I am putting words in his mouth of things that he did not say. Right. And so David and I have our own communication breakdowns where we have worked very hard, because a lot of these communication breakdowns, to be 100 guys, could ruin a relationship, because most people will not stick it out. And I give David and I a lot of credit, because there have been many times where we're like, fuck this shit, whatever, done with this shit. But we've realized, look, you're going to have the same communication issue with anybody else. And so why not be able to triumph over this and work towards it together, instead of throwing out all of this stuff that we have worked for and not, being able to triumph over this. And that's taken a long time within our relationship too, to also grow. And that is part of this personal development that we're talking about, where it's getting out of that comfort zone, where it's getting into that growth zone, because this is a growth zone, So today, when David and I had a communication breakdown, it is over something that we've continued to communicate and trying to resolve, and not trying, we are doing. There is resolution that is coming. Yes, sometimes it doesn't seem so peachy keen. As before this podcast got started, we did not really want to talk to each other. I told David, just text message me, put it in a freaking writing. I'm done having communication. That doesn't help. 100. I'll just openly say that now. That does not help. That is just further breaking down the communication that you're trying to build in order to get to resolution. And so, as much as I like to say, hey, I like to be solution oriented, I too am a part of the problem, period. We all are a part of the problem. And that is when you can have that most upfront humility about who you're being in the situation. You might not be the person who's causing the situation. Like, okay, there's a fire all of a sudden and you showed up and, the fire was already started. You didn't start the fire, but you stuck around and you kept on adding wood to the fire, right? You are a part of this, but you didn't start it. So what I mean by that is, we get in a life, in a cycle where it's who started it, who's done this, who's right, who's wrong. We live as a society in the who's right and who's wrong. And we really have to understand that the biggest part of getting out of your comfort zone and growing into your growth zone is really the communication, not so much with other people, but more with yourself. Are you willing to allow yourself to understand that, hey, I don't always get it right. I have the best of intentions. My intention is not to hurt or make someone feel that way, but that's how it's showing up. And allowing that other person, especially if it's somebody that you care about, like David and Tara, allowing that person to share that without there be judgment or allow there to be upset or communication breakdowns or emotion, right? And a lot of times what happens as humans is we get stuck in all of the facts. Where, for instance, why I shared with you guys that a part of what David and I deal with is, me getting loud. And then what's happened over 15 years is because I've gotten loud, David's gotten loud, so he can even be heard and talk, and get into the interjection of the conversation. So I've created a situation where now David would get loud in return. So we would be two loud people screaming at each other, trying to get resolution. And that does not work, at all. The other thing that we've realized within the breakdown of communication is that scorecard keeping and keeping the score of what has happened over the past evolution of our relationship in a whole of 15 years, or are we going to be present within what's happening now? Because in reality, yes, like I shared earlier, David shares with me, hey, you've done this for 15 years. You've gotten loud with me for 15 years. He's not wrong. I can't sit here and say, oh, he's the bullshit liar. That's not, nope. But what we can do is say, okay, we acknowledge that, but we're talking about what's happening here, what's going on in this situation, so we can resolve what's happening at the current present time. Because Tara getting loud was not what happened within the conversation. So the reason why I share that is because we have to be onerous enough to stop and allow the other person to be able to, for instance, when you have two people communicating like David and I, you have to not only maintain a space of integrity for yourself where you hold yourself accountable and you don't tell the story that has been at play for many, many years, and you live in the present time, and you want to be in a solution minded, as well as we have to hold ourselves of integrity to hold a space for the other person as well to be able to communicate. So not only are you holding yourself to a level of integrity, you're, have to really 10 toes down and, hold yourself accountable. And that's hard because most people, they don't think other people see it. And so they try to sweep things underneath the rug. They try to dismiss it. It's tactics that David and I have both done, where we shift the focus back to the other person. These are all defending and denying mechanisms that we do in order to be in survival mode, or to survive, which thrusts us into survival, right? And so we have to create those spaces. We have to create those spaces for us to be able to be in growth zone with grace and understanding that everybody is growing. We also have to find ourselves within a zone of understanding that, yes, we have a perspective, but so does the other person have a perspective. And we can't live in the world that only my perspective matters, because that turns into a dictatorship. Then when you are unwilling to hear what the other person has to say, and when I say that, first of all, because this is something that came up within David and I's conversation, when you went round and round and round 8 times on something, 6 times on something, every time it comes around that, hey, I see your opinion. I see your perspective. I don't agree with it. Here are the reasons why I don't agree with it. We're not getting anywhere except for the fact that we agree that we have two different perspectives. That at that point, when you have had that conversation 6, 7, 8 times, three conversations on each side. David had 3, I had 3, so 6 total. 4 on each side. David had 4, I had 4 total. And we're beating this, as they say, the same dead horse. At that point, you have to stop and say, okay, well, let's just park the conversation, because we are two different, we know that we have two different perspectives. Let's just honor the other one that has a different perspective, respect the fact that they have one, and keep it moving. It's not going to be the end of life and death. However, that's different when you're ending a conversation that's not productive, when you're in a conversation about trying to produce a solution, especially when the other person, i.e. Tara, has communicated to, i.e. David, that, hey, I get we have two different perspectives here, and this is a difficult conversation, and we're both trying to get to the solution. We both want a resolution. We both want to understand, so the other person, so we have, like, this is, okay, this is what happens. This is how it makes me feel. This is how we need to navigate through it, right? And so having those clear mechanisms and those clear communications and understanding, and not cutting off the conversation after one person has shared and we've only both shared once, where we're trying to come up with a resolution. That's like basically saying, okay, this is what's it, and that's the solution. Well, there was no solution given. All that was told was that Tara was overstepping a boundary, and that I wasn't doing what I was saying I was doing, and that I am now creating a situation that is not what David feels all cozy and warm and fuzzy about. It's creating an environment where I am showing up as a white privileged woman, and I am asking, please share more so I can be able to resurrect that. So at the end of the day, as we share with you guys, David and I too are still growing and still learning and still navigating through these channels of communication as for growth. And this is a part of getting out of that comfort zone. If we don't get out of that comfort zone, then we just stay idle. And as we have shared in past rooms that we've done, that if you're not growing, you're essentially dead. And that's in all aspects. If you're not growing within your business, if you're not growing within your relationships, if you're not growing within your communication, if you're not growing within your mindset, if you're not growing within your chakras, meaning your, vibrations and who you are, showing up to be, understanding that none of us are perfect. And most of us have the best of intention, but we are human and we fuck things up. And we make it other people, hurt other people's feelings by our actions and our words. There's multiple times that I can sit here and share, when my feelings have been hurt, especially as a Cancer. I can talk about, times that shoot, you can pull a name out of the hat and I can just tell you, okay, these are all the times that I felt that person's hurt my feelings. As a woman and as a Cancer, fuck, that's what I say. Emotions are a whole nother level of layer. And as being one of the emotional signs, most emotional signs within the zodiac, and a woman who has these things called hormones that change every week, every day, let's not say every week, every day, it is like navigating a minefield fucking blind. And having grace about doing it. I am not going to put words into David's mouth, but I am probably pretty sure that him having to experience and navigate life as a Black man in America is probably a million times that of navigating a minefield while blind or blindfolded, or, and no legs and no arms and, just the extreme. So a lot of times what happens that keeps us in our own personal prisons is not willing to say, hey, I also fuck up. I also do things that don't make you feel good. I also do the things that I ask you not to do. I also need to get out of my lazy comfort ways, or I also am stuck in the comfort mode and not growth. I also don't, get up and walk, 17 miles every day like, I should. I also, didn't help that person hold open that door for that person that had their hands full today at the store. Whatever those things are, we have to be so willing to hold ourselves accountable before we start looking at the other person. And a lot of times what happens, and I'll say within David and I's upsets of breakdowns of communications, it's not even about what we're talking about. It's the fact that we feel that the other person is oblivious to who they are being. And that literally is the issue that David and I have most of the time, is that because we are together all the time, all day, every day, we are hyper aware of what the other person is doing, and we have to navigate like our emotions and our sensitivity. Let me say that for myself. My sensitivity, as how things are brought to me or said or shared, and it really has to get down to understanding that instead of making assumptions, like David has shared with me, which is part of this conversation, was, hey, if I am getting loud in a conversation, don't make a statement that I'm getting loud. Actually ask, and don't make that assumption, because that assumption is not always accurate. And that right there, that word right there, assumption. We as humans do that so often that within the comfort over growth sector is we will make assumptions, and those assumptions will leave us paralyzed to where we're not taking action. We're not doing what we need to be doing. We're not being humble and humility, full of humility with our own selves. We're not holding ourselves accountable. We're not showing up and saying, hey, I'm stuck. My mental health is not progressing in the way that I want to. My personal development's not progressing. My communication is lacking. I'm having the same breakdown with everybody. Look, at the end of the day, you are the problem. I'm the problem. David's the problem. You listening, you're the problem. What do you mean, Tara? You're the problem in your own life. Something's not going right. Something's not working in your life. You're the problem, period. It's not the other person. It's you. Your life doesn't work because of you. Your life doesn't work because you're showing up with the set of lenses of how you see everything, because, hey, like David has shared, what do you expect? 40 plus years in America as a Black man, you're going to have a certain type of way of seeing things. You're going to know the game. You're going to be hip to the game. You're going to be looking for the game. You're going to be making sure you get in front of that so you don't be a part of that mix up, so you don't end up as a casualty in that game. So we all have something that's going on. Some people have a whole lot more layers added to that. And so it comes down to, are you willing to hold yourself accountable? Are you willing to stop and say, okay, hey, this is how I feel. This is how something's happening. But I also understand I'm doing this as well. I'm also part of this problem. I'm also a part of the issue. Because guess what? If you weren't a part of the problem, then you wouldn't have that problem, period. So my 2 cents in this whole thing, at the end of the day, as I have shared with you guys personally, of things that David and I still, deal with just as of today, whether we share things with you that we deal with from a professional side of things, whether we deal with things from a personal side of things within our own conversation, as if just uno silo, like, your self only silo there. It comes down to how effective are you within the communication? And I mean that from the level of the communication with yourself, the communication you're having with others, and the communication that you project out into the world. Meaning, when you talk to other people, we all have a point of view. We all have a share. We all share from a perspective. All of those perspectives influence our life. And so it comes down to, in my opinion, in order to be able to be extremely abundant and rich in life. And what I mean by that, it's not just with your pocketbooks, because that will come as well, but rich in love, rich in happiness, rich in peace, rich in joy, rich in being able to let things roll off your back, and being solution oriented, all of those things. Rich in community, rich in family, and rich in your mind and your heart. And all of those things come from how willing are you to hold yourself accountable for your own personal growth, and be extremely, extremely honest with yourself. Because as I say that, I too know that I say it, be honest with yourself. Nope. None of us are 100% honest with ourselves. Not even myself. We all have blind spots that when that other person brings up and shows, and David shows me, or I show David something, we have those blind spots that cause a traumatic trigger. And that traumatic trigger sends you into survival mode. And survival mode sends you back into your comfort zone, and you hide so you can be in safety. We all have it. We can't sit here and tell the other person about theirs until we're willing to look at our own. And that is why, if you come to me, or you come to this company, Hello LLC, and you don't come with being able to have an open, ability to find common ground and have open communication that's respectful and positive, with a solution-oriented mind, and being solution-oriented in the process, I will note there is no communication that needs to happen. David's the same way. There needs to be no communication if it can't be effective, respectful communication. And that has to start with yourself. And then that has to go ahead and bleed out into other conversations you have. So at the end of the day, that would be my share. It was a lengthy share. Thank you so much for letting me share that. And I'll pass this mic back over to you, Mr. Jones.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we'd like to welcome you all, and thank you all for joining us today for this amazing conversation with our Getting Naked podcast in the Metaverse, one of the first podcasts in the Metaverse where you guys can come and join this live conversation. As you can see, it is real, it is raw, and more importantly, it's unfiltered and uncensored. And, as a lot of us, sit here and we listen to different conversations, and even when we go out and about with our significant other, and we, hear other people talk, and then your significant other talks, and you hear them share, and how they share and what they say, and we all know that look like, your ass is fucking lying. That's not what the fuck you doing or saying, and this is a whole bunch of good bullshit you talking out loud to people, but that's not what happens behind the closed doors. And it's cute and adorable that now you're trying to apologize out loud in public, other than when you have the opportunity to apologize, and you continue to still stay in your ego, your pride, and that petty, nasty shit that you do behind closed doors. And we all can just call a spade is that We all have our partners and our friends that act one way behind closed doors and show up as another, and we call that bullshit. And that's exactly what the fuck you just heard from just the point of view. And as I get interrupted, as talking, a prime example that for the guys, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't fucking matter. We all know that our ladies can go for 30, 40 fucking minutes. And, you're not interrupt. You're not saying a single fucking word. But you can't get 10 seconds, a minute out without them saying anything while they sit there and talk about communication and it's effective and coming up with solutions when they bring war out the gate. Mind you, before this whole podcast conversation, from my standpoint, me and Tara were having a conversation about how a conversation we had the other day that I was bringing to her attention of, hey, you can't sit here and talk about other races and other, people and how they respond and how that resonates with what you're sharing. And then yet when I share it, how you respond and how you react, you get defensive and you don't want to talk about it and you deflect and you deny and you run. That just doesn't jive right. And literally, we were having a conversation before the podcast, and it was time to go for the podcast, and we had some technical difficulties. And I came back and I said, hey, do you have anything else you wanted to share? She got everything out that she wanted to share. Mind you, I brought it back up. And we listened to each other. And then it was my turn to talk and share with her. And in my share, she was proving out the exact thing that I was sharing in my first share, that you can't deny, you can't deflect, you can't give me attitude and demeanor and say, oh, no, that's not me. And that was all of her energy and deflection that she was showcasing while I was sharing to her from my side of how I felt. So although you heard Tara sit here and talk about communication, you saw her and talked about emotion, you heard her talk about navigation and astrology and menstrual cycle, we're always aware to share these things out loud when it doesn't fucking matter. Other than being aware of it in the heat of the battle, that, hey, I am in my emotions. Hey, this guy is bringing up, a conversation that is a little touchy. And this is exactly what he's sharing with me, that, hey, this is how I'm seeing it from me being, first of all, your man. And then you also sharing with me that, hey, I want to understand where you're coming from, how you feel, what's going All right, I think I'm back, Jack. uh, that's crazy. So as I was sharing, and this would be another part of it, as she walks away during the podcast, right, ladies and gentlemen, because we're being real. This is unfiltered. This is uncensored. This is unstoppable. Getting naked. This is what we do. We're a little bit over time, but this is well worth it, right? At the end of the day. And so as I shared with her how that conversation went and she wouldn't allow me to share, she fails to forget that she shut me down when we were in that original conversation earlier in the week. And we went around and about 3 times. I talked, she talked, I talked, she talked. Then it was time for me to go back around. So I'm sorry, 5. It was time for me to go back around and talk. She said, "Oh no, conversation's done. I don't want to hear. Well, you said your part, I've said my part, we're done." She shut it down. She didn't want to hear me. Today, after the third iteration, and I realized we got to get to our podcast, mind you, I just said, "Hey, look, after I already gave her opportunity to share what she needed to say, I shared what I needed to say. She didn't like what I needed to say. As I'm sharing with her, she then, ladies and gentlemen, as she talks about communication and not going back and not allowing your emotions, she then decided to remind me how I then was acting like a client of ours. So throwing grenades, as I've reminded her that she consistently does, is throw grenades first and then wonders why. And then she told me, "Don't talk to me." And then she decided to say, "Well, just text me moving forward, email me moving forward," is what she said. And in the old great way, I love it when she talks about communication. She decides to put in her headsets to ignore me after she walked away from the conversation and decided to then be in her demeanor that she's in now. She's laughing now. If you guys can, I'm pretty sure you can hear it because you heard my cup earlier. She's laughing now as if she didn't walk away when she got pissed off and mad that I made a point. You decided to shut down the conversation after your share. The last conversation, you said, "Nope, conversation's done. You shared what you shared. I've shared what I shared. We see two different perspective ways. That's it. That's all. Don't talk about it." And this is where I share the white privilege comes into place, ladies and gentlemen. I do it today, and she loses her shit and decides to escalate the situation, which is what Karens do. They escalate the situation, say some comment that throw in the grenade, "Don't talk to me," put on her headsets, and then tells me to email her or text her in conversations. And then we're only moving forward in our relationship as business only. So it's amazing hearing somebody sit here and share with you guys all about, hey, communication, navigating, being aware. But yet we weren't aware in the heat of the battle, let alone when your man was sharing with you from a Black perspective how it came across to me. And it wasn't an argument from the beginning. It was never an argument. It was a conversation and having a dialect that got escalated, which she will miss the whole entire point, that it was escalated to her on her own accord, sitting there saying, "Don't talk to me, email me, and business only," and putting in her headsets because she didn't like what I had to share. But yet I'm supposed to respect her perspective, but she doesn't want to respect the other person's perspective and gets mad when somebody does the exact same thing that they did prior 2 days ago, and then calls that scorekeeping when that's not scorekeeping. That is keeping the peace as you claim to do, and I'm doing the same. But as she shared with you, the interruptions, she's interrupted me for 15 plus years, multiple times. And then she says, I interrupted her once. She, once again, that's that escalation of dramatizing stuff. I've interrupted her multiple times throughout the 15 years. She stated to you guys, he said once. No, the one time that I did interrupt you yesterday or 2 days ago, you blew it out of proportion and escalated the situation. So if you're not aware of what a Karen is, a Karen is somebody that escalates the situation and blows things out of proportion for no apparent way, and then plays like they didn't do anything at the end, or acts like it didn't happen, or they forget. And then they run away when you call them out on it, or change the goalposts and add in things and forget the things that they said, that why it got escalated on their own accord. And so that is literally, when we talk about these conversations, and I'm so glad this conversation, when we talk about, growth, when we talk about, comfort, this is exactly what happened earlier today, was that I saw somebody go back in their comfort zone and run away from a conversation that was not a bad conversation, not a conflict of any sort, just a conversation in general, especially when it comes to race. And we all know this, especially my Black people, we know this, is that when we do talk about race, when we do bring up, those itchy conversations, people want to, we bring up slavery, we bring about facts, we bring about, hey, this is what happened. Do you realize this is still happening? Do you realize this just happened today? Do you realize this? Then it just gets avoided and changed, and the subject gets changed, or you might get thrown in your face. Well, Black people sold Black people as well during slavery. That would be an example of changing the goalposts and changing the overall conversation. And so I'm so glad that we had this conversation today, especially this is part 2 from last week, if you really want to think about it, of how me as a man, me as a Black man in an interracial relationship, that she just shared with you guys, that she got loud and has been loud, and that's been a condition and a pattern. But yet I say one thing, and as she shared, one octane, or I get loud, I've now getting chastised. Or as she said earlier, 15 years of her interrupting, and now it's one, I've been interrupting her. The difference is she knows exactly when we talk about interruptions, that she can interrupt me in a normal conversation and an argument, and it does not get escalated to the point as when I interrupt her. Conversation's over. I'm done talking. We're finished. And then the kicker is that she will say all of these things, forget that she ended the conversation, and I will get up and leave. And she will swear before God that I left the room and I left the conversation when she shut down the conversation and said conversation was over. She didn't want to speak to me, or she throws a grenade and says some nasty shit. So, I mean, this is where we are, and being able to truly sit here and say these things out to people, and really be able for them to get an inside look of how our story plays into their story, because ain't no shame in this game whatsoever. We've went through a lot of growth. There has been a lot of growth, and there continues to be growth. But at some point, there becomes where, as I said earlier, you start lying to your fucking self, and you get comfortable in that mud and that rotation of being that hot dog at the fucking 7-Eleven and just keeps rotating around and wondering why shit's not working. As you heard Tara say earlier, it's because you're not working. And when you decide not to communicate, when you decide not to listen, when you decide to be right over than listen, and other than looking good or avoiding the conversation or looking bad, or more importantly, facing the music of how you actually showed up. As earlier when she talked about that, oh, David, we have these conversations and we agree on how we're supposed to do things. As we did earlier, she said, David, I've been doing the things that you've been asking me to do. And I had to bring to her attention, no, love. For an example, when we had our last conversation, You shared with me that you wouldn't bring up, hey, David, you're getting loud. You shared with me that you would ask me or let me know, hey, David, are you aware that you're getting loud? And in the last conversation, in the last, disagreement, she literally said, you're getting loud, you're getting loud, you're getting loud to me. And then claimed to fame in our makeup that, oh, David, you're right. I didn't do those things that I said that I would do. And that's where I messed up. And then even today, she made a statement that, David, you tell me I need to do these things and I do these things. And I had to remind her, love, you don't do these things. You sell yourself that you do them and you didn't. And then your argument is that you do when you don't, because you're not facing the facts, you're not facing the music, and you're not being fucking aware of how you're showing up and how you are having these Karen moves that you're unaware of because of your trauma, because of your drama, because of your patterns and your programs that I, as your man, am letting you know about. And that now you're laughing, you're mocking, and you're dismissing what I'm sharing with you, yet you're sharing back that you want to understand, but yet you're not understanding, especially by doing the exact opposite of what you should be doing and listening to me. You escalated it and did your same patterns of throwing a customer in my face and then telling me not to talk to you and then telling me to text you and then telling me that I told you those things when you said those things with your headsets on, that then again, you changed the game, that now all of a sudden she's changed it to where it's okay for her to put her headsets in when she doesn't like what I'm saying or when she thinks I'm being loud. When I share with her, Tara, if you're going to get loud, I'm going to vacate the room. And I clearly let you know that you're getting loud. Then I'm going to vacate. She's changed the goalpost that whenever she feels that I'm getting loud, she's not going to ask me not to lower my voice. She's not going to do anything. She's just going to immediately put on her headsets and not listen to me and avoid me and then claim to fame, as you all heard her. So glad it's recorded, that she wants to communicate effectively when yet she's doing the very fucking opposite of what the fuck she says and told you guys that she's doing. So, as I shared with you from the jump, this is that moment you go out with your friends, you're having a good time, your significant other says something, and you give them that side eye like, yo ass is lying. This is that point. And she'll probably come up and say something else that I'm lying, but I'm pretty sure I cannot find a lie on the fact that you told me don't talk to you, text you, and that you compared a client to the situation and then told me to email you moving forward. So I'm lost unless that would be what we would say as a Karen move, as I said beforehand. That was escalated from not an argument as well, ladies and gentlemen, not an argument as well. It was a conversation that I continued and asked her if she had anything else. And yet she shut me down the other day. That was okay. She shut me the fuck down, said, nope, we're done with this conversation, not going to talk. I do it to her because we got a damn podcast to get to. She didn't like it. So I don't know what you call that, but I know for me, I call that a little double standard, that it was okay for you to do it and treat people how you wanted to be treated. And she damn sure didn't give me the respect whatsoever to rebuttal or to respond back to her whole entire, as you guys have heard, for 30 minutes. And I've went for 18. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? We appreciate you joining us today for our amazing Getting Naked podcast. I'm not going to be, that person, that particular guy, but this is what it is. This is where we get to when we get to talk out loud and have these conversations. And so we appreciate you guys joining us today. We greatly want you guys to come back and join us for our next amazing podcast, which I can tell you right now, that podcast is going to be The American Dream is Getting Outside of America. Going to have an amazing conversation on that. Never know where we'll be, how we'll be, or where we'll be at. But guess what? The show goes on at the end of the day. So without further ado, I'll do what we do at the end of the day. Come on, you ready? You ready? Come on, let's go. Love,
kindness,
integrity,
but most importantly,
commitment,
and
consistency. Until next time, toodles.
Hasta luego.